Okay, so we are holding in the Gemara Chelek Perek Chelek, page 111a. Let's bring up the original the text. And Rabbi Stein's out. Okay, here it goes. All right, we were holding on top. It was a kind of a conversation between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan about so the last statement we said before at the end of last class is that when it quotes the pasuk in Yeshaya, Lachein Herchiva Sha'ol Navsha Ufara Pia Livli Chayk, the Reish Lakish learns that they brought in the Sha'ol, the abyss, means to say that, and Livli Chayk, those who don't have chukim, which are mitzvahs. So Reish Lakish says that even if you don't do one mitzvah, you're a person who's going to be part of the abyss. You're going to go to Gehenna, to hell. And Rabbi Yochanan says that how could you say that? That's too extreme. And therefore he says that even if you just have one chukim, then you're not going to be. Okay. So he says like this. Now we continue. He quotes a pasuk. The Shenemar seems to be a question of girsa, because it seems to be Shenemar would be a continuation of that conversation, or you could just say that it's quoting a verse, but it doesn't. There's no real connection 100%. I mean, there's in context there's a connection, but not in the details. It says the pasuk quotes in Zechariah that Zechariah says. It says like this: "V'haya b'chol haaretz." Hey, Barbara, we're just getting started in the new piece on 111a. So it says. V'haya b'chol haaretz, and it'll be in all the land, Ne'um Hashem, so says the Lord. Pi shnayim ba yikarsu, this is talking about the days of Moshiach. 2/3, pi shnayim would be 2/3, is yikarsu, would be eliminated from the word kares, and yigva'u, they would die. V'hashlish is only, so to say, the 1/3, yivaser behem will survive. So this is the pasuk in Zechariah that indicates that in the days of Moshiach, 2 parts will die. 2 parts of what is the question, and 1 part will survive. How does Reish Lakish learn the pasuk in line? That's why maybe it says Shnemar in continuation of his shita of more, so to say, but there's going to be more severe punishment. So he says like this. Reish Lakish shlishi shel shem. Who's the third of what? I mean, who are we dividing? So Reish Lakish says 1/3 of shem. So we have Noach. And Rashi didn't explain it. We have to hold cup, like to say the math of Rashi, where others kind of simplify it. Rashi kind of complicates it. Reish Lakish says according that 1/3 of shem. So there's 3 sons of Noach that survived the flood. So that's the whole society. Anyone who's alive today, if you're not a descendant of Og Melech HaBashan, or that held onto the boat, but society, the civilization today are the descendants of Noach. That's what we're called Bnei Noach, right? So there's 3 sons of Noach. She has 3 sons, Yefes, Cham, and Shem. Shem is the 3rd, and he is 1/3. So Reish Lakish says that the 1/3 that's going to survive is not Shem, but 1/3 of Shem. And Rashi says 1/3 of 1/3 of 1/3 of Shem. Rabbi Yochanan says that's to say that only 1/3 of Shem is going to die, is going to survive. That means for sure Cham and Yafis, whoever their descendants are they're going to be killed out in the days of Moshiach, and 1/3 of Shem is only going to survive. So he says, how could you say that? That you're not leaving. It doesn't. It's not satisfactory to Hashem to say that about that so many people would die. You have to say 1/3 of Noach. I mean, to say it's still no one's arguing that 2/3 are going to die, but 2/3 of what? So 2/3, 1/3 of Noach is going to survive, which means, according to Rashi, according to all the Mefarshim, would be the descendants of Shem. Before we learn Rashi, which he does the math of what is Reish Lakish talking about and why is Rabbi Yochanan disappointed. Now, first of all, so he says the simple explanation is I think it's the Marsha says. Oops, hold on, my other Gemara jumped a second. No, then Kuf Yud Amid Beis, Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Beis. All right, while this is bringing up, let's learn the Rashi. Pishnayim ba yikaresu v'yigvau v'ashlishis yivaser ba. That's the pasuk. Two-thirds will be cut off and die, and 1/3 will yivaser be survive. So he says, sorry, Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph, you are not Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Beis. Just trying to see the Marsha before we learn Rashi. The Marsha says, okay, it's not here. I don't know where I saw the Marsha. Marsha just done simply 1/3. The Rish Lakish holds 1/3 of Rash of 1/3 will be the descendants. 1/3 of the descendants of Shem. But here Rashi like this: Amr Rish Lakish Shlishi Shel Shem. What does it mean? 1/3 of Shem. Shebeis Chalakim Shakol Oilam Yiyu Nechrasim V'Chelik Yim Livaser. 2/3 will be of the world will be cut off. I should make sure everyone can get in. I think someone's trying to get in. 2/3 are going to 2/3 are going to be cut off, and 1/3 will survive. What third are we talking about? As much as you could third down, that's the third that's going to survive. We cut into 3. Who's the survivors of the flood? Only Noach. Noach had 3 children, Shem, Cham, and Yafes. Shlish banav, Shem, 1/3 of his sons is Shem. V'shlishi shel Shem, and who is, if you divide the sons of Shem, although he had, I think, 5 sons, but the 3 main sons, is Arpachshad. Arpachshad, we learn about Arpachshad at the end of Parshas Noach, when we list the people who survived the floods around the time of the Tower of Babylon, and we learn that Arpachshad will be the father of, or the great-grandfather of Avraham. So he says, so Arpachshad is 1/3 of Shem. So Lud and Aram don't count. And who's going to survive? If we have to choose which third of Shem is going to survive, it's of course going to be Arpachshad. Why? Because Yisrael Yotzim Mimenu. The Jewish people are descendants of Arpachshad, meaning Avram Avinu, Avram our father, is a descendant of Arpachshad. V'shlishi shel Arpachshad, shushlishi shel Shem, shushlishi shel Noach, Yivaser. Only 1/3 of Arpachshad, 1/3 of Shem, which is 1/3 of Noach, because Rashi learns we third, is going to survive the world. Hey Aaron, hey Danny. V'chol olim yikaraisu. And everyone else is going to be killed out when Moshiach comes. So according to Rish Lakish, 1/3 of Noach's children, which is Shem, 1/3 of his children with Arpachshad, and 1/3 of Arpachshad's children are going to be the survivors of we're going to live out in the times of Moshiach. Well, divrei Rish Lakish. So what turns out, according to Rish Lakish, you're really cutting society down to a very small minority of people that are going to survive the coming of Moshiach. Nimtzu turns out Yisrael mismatim yoser. What the Jewish people will be lessened. This is interesting on its own. If I were to, again, I don't have a consensus of who's Jewish, who's not Jewish, and etc. But it's still the percentage we are today of society is so small. The Jewish people is so small that there's no problem that these numbers should match. That 1/3 of 1/3 of 1/3 of Arpachshad, of Noach, and 1/3 of Arpachshad means 1/3 of that should survive. That would be plenty of people for the Jewish. Every person who's identified today is known as a Jew to survive. But this is a schus, by the way. Based on Rish Lakish, he says that Rashi learns that mismatim yoser, the Jewish people are going to have to be cut down to size. Why? Meaning to say there's going to be too many Jews. Why? Because Shimi Arpachshad Yotzi Yisrael. Because the Jewish people come out of Arpachshad. Arpachshad hoilis Chelek, Chelek hoilis Ever, Eil hoilis Perek, Ad Avram. So again, there's many kids of Arpachshad had. and Avram is only a great grandson of Arpachshad. Avram. Here, since he doesn't count in anyone else. It says if you're going to divide the descendants of Arpachshad, and who are today the descendants of Arpachshad, he only counts the Jewish people, the Arabs or the Ishmaelites, and he counts the descendants of Lot and Haran. Seemingly, according to Rashi, somewhere or another over the time, the other descendants of Arpachshad, we just said Arpachshad had Chelek, Aver, Peleg. There's a lot of people there, and they all had children. So he's only dividing the Jewish people amongst the Yishmaelim, the Arabs, the descendants of Lot. Let's say that's also really the Arab countries. Lot lived in Moab. Haran, I'm not sure where he lives. Okay, and others he mentions. If you divide the descendants of Arpachshad into three, Shem Yisrael Yim Reuben, Bekroivim Lias Keneget Kulam V'lo Yagia Kol Zer Arpachshad Lias Bishnayim. Elim Ken Yisrael Mashlimim V'Reuben Oichetzin V'Nimsi Yisrael Mismatim Techeshtayim. What is he saying? Rashi says that it could be that when Moshiach comes, if you're going to divide Arpachshad into three, then you're going to have to lose, he says, half or the majority of the Jews to make only 1/3 survive. Meaning to say, let's say you would have 100 people, and you would have, that 1/3 of Arpachshad would make up 100 people, and of that 100 people, Rashi says it could be 70 of those people are going to be Jewish. So and you need only 35 could survive. So we're going to lose 40 Jews to the 35 that survive, and that's not right according to Rabbi Yochanan. So according to Rashi, Rabbi Yochanan's issue is that the Jewish people are going to have to die out. Now again, like I said, this is, if you look at it, it's a tremendous bracha what Rashi's saying, because there's no way today in the numbers we have today that this math that Rashi's mentioning is a concern. That the Jewish people would be, if you divide up the Jewish people, the Arabs and the children of Lot, and the other descendants of Arpachshad, that the Jewish people would make up a half or more than half of that number. It's just, unless there's a lot of people that are out there that are Jewish that we just don't know. Okay. So therefore, Rish Lakish is, and again, not the most Mefarshim do not agree with Rashi's explanation of the Gemara. Most commentaries say no, it's just 1/3 of Shem. You don't have to go 1/3 of Arpachshad. I mean, he keeps on going lower and lower, and still it's not good. It means what Rashi's concerned about is what Rashi's trying to figure out. Why is Rabbi Yochanan concerned? I mean, if you want to have an open conversation online, according to Rashi, what's bothering Rabbi Yochanan is only what's going to happen to the Jewish people. That's it. And because, according to Rashi, there could be that the Jewish people are going to have to themselves be lessened in order to make up 1/3 of Arpachshad. Therefore, that's not good. But the other commentaries say, no, he's just upset that there's going to be so many people dead. And even if the Jews will survive, it's still a lot of people that are going to die. Okay, it's just to say, I think that's basically the question. Very interesting that Rashi is the one that says this. So what does Rabbi Yochanan say? Hey Shuki, we're learning a Rashi on top of page Kufid Alf Amdalef, where we're talking about that according to, there's an argument Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, how many people will survive when Mashiach comes? Rabbi Yochanan, and based on a pasuk in Zechariah, Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rashi, Rish Lakish for holding Rashi, he learns that it's going to be 1/3 of Noach, which is Shem, which 1/3 of Shem is Arpachshad, and 1/3 of Arpachshad is going to be the Jewish people, and according to Rashi, it could be that the Jewish people will make up more, or even a majority of the 1/3 of Arpachshad. So he says, "Sha'atim imata isem kol kach el afilu shlishi shel Noach klemer mikol bnei Noach dana mikol ha'olam kulay yivaser hashlish umistama oisei chelek hagimel sheYisrael ba'yiyasheres." So Rabbi Yochanan says no. We're talking about just 1/3 of Noach is going to survive, which means if all people alive, 1/3 is going to survive. And if the assumption is that 1/3 is going to be where the Jewish people come from, which are the descendants of Shem. So the descendants of Shem will survive the coming of Moshiach. But you're going to say, 1 second. Based on this, according to Rashi, you're going to have a survival. Let's say hypothetically, there's there's 20 billion people in the world today. So 1/3 is still a big number. Right? It's 6 billion people. And Rashi says, 1 second, it's not 6 billion Jews. Meaning Rashi is coming to say the only concern is how many Jews are going to survive the coming of Mashiach. And only the Jews should be surviving the coming of Mashiach, seemingly from Rashi, even according to Rabbi Yochanan. So nevertheless, he says, So he goes, add the converts. And like we learned before, that there's the Gentiles that are going to survive, which are Chassidim Salem, the righteous Gentiles. And yes, it could possibly be that the number of righteous Gentiles will be 1/3 of the sons of Noah. So together, if we're talking, let's say, 6 billion people, yes, it's not a big deal to find. There's plenty of beautiful, lovely people out there in the world. Not everyone's hateful and destructive. And that's going to be the 1/3 that's going to survive the Moshiach. The Jews, the converts, and the Chassidim of the Chavim, the righteous Gentiles. Lahashel neshlish, and that would make up 1/3. V'im heimu rubam lias yoser b'chelik hashlitis. What happens if that's the case? And then if you're going to count, the problem Rashi says is 1 second. If you're going to count it, converts, the Jews, and the righteous Gentiles, what happens? There's more than, maybe most of society are nice people, good people, righteous Gentiles. So why you said, then what are you going to do then? So then you're going to be smartuktas. According to Zechariah, some people are going to die, even those which shouldn't die because they're righteous. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan and Yisrael mismatim. At the end of the day, the Jewish people won't be lessened. Again, Rashi is concerned that then today's numbers either of them would be fine. The Jewish people are such a small percentage of society that even if we're 1/3 of our Pakshad, I think we're still going to have some extras to join us, right? So Mikol Makom Rabbi Yochanan and Yisrael mismatim. Kol kach, he says. Means even according to Rashi learns that even if you're going to count 1/3, we may lose a few. We may 1/3, meaning the descendants of Noach, we're going to maybe lose a few Jews. This is Mighty Rabbi. This is what my teacher told me. So Rashi learned Pshat and Gemara from my teacher. Lashon Achar, another opinion is Shlishi Shel Shem. It's just 1/3 of Shem. Vashlishis mashma shnei shlish. Kachnem shlishis shel Shem v'chsiv b'nei Shem ilam v'ash v'rach b'achshad v'yishram b'achshad. That's only that Rashi says there is an opinion that means only 1/3 of Shem, and that's our Pachshad. Then he's going to survive, not 1/3 of our Pachshad. That basically all the survivors, all the descendants of our Pachshad will survive. The Shem who ben Shlishi Shal Noach, Ubnei Noach, Shem Cham V'Yafes, Bar Pachshad Shlishi Shem V'Ikr. Okay, so he says that at the end of the day, the Lashon Achar says is that we just count either. Rabbi Yochanan says the 1/3 of Shem of Noach, which is the whole family of Shem, or the second lashon is the 1/3 of the 1/3, means you have to go 3 up. So our Pachshad, Shem, and Noach is 3. So that's going to survive, and that means all the descendants of our Pachshad. But according to the first explanation of Rashi, according to what he learned from his Rebbe, and he explains the first 2 Rashis based on that, that's going to be 1/3 of our Pachshad, and based on that, he's concerned that Jews will die, because Jews will possibly make up even more than half of the descendants of our Pachshad. Again, even if you were to count what Rashi counts, the Ishmaelim, Bnei Lot, Haran, and Shar Umais, today, I don't know based on consensus. Again, it could be there's a lot of lost Jews out there over the years. We have the 10 lost tribes. It could be that, and Moshiach knows who's Jewish and who's not Jewish, so there could be that the numbers in the billions is not so outrageous. And we're going to see even more crazy numbers coming up now. Let's see what Rabbi Steinzat says. Rabbi Steinzat says it appears that the version of the text that Rashi used said 1/3 of the 1/3 of Shem, meaning 1/3 of the descendants of the 3rd son of Shem. Rashi explains that phrase. It's not satisfactory to their master, means that the concern is that the members of the number of Jews who survive will be diminished as they are included in the calculation. Again, even based on those numbers today, if we're 1.5, what are we? I don't even know the numbers. If anyone knows, please speak up exactly today what the percentage of Jews in society is. But I still don't see how in today's days those numbers are concerning. Either way, the Ramah and the Mashah explain, here's my Sadr Mashah, that the concern is not limited to the Jewish people. Rather, Rabbi Yochanan's concern is that according to Reish Lakish, most of the world's population will be destroyed. Okay, even Rabbi Yochanan agrees 2/3 of the world will be destroyed. But according to Reish Lakish, it will be 2/3 of the descendants of Shem will be destroyed, meaning a huge majority of the world won't survive. Again, so the Ramah and Marsha say that Rabbi Yochanan is concerned that there should be so much death in the world. And according to Rashi, the concern is about what's going to happen to the Jewish people. We could talk about this at length, about the argument between the Marsha, Ramah, and Rashi, and how Rashi looks at the days of Moshiach, but we will go further. Okay, so the Gemara continues. So that's the hard Rashis that we waited for last week. The pasuk says in Yirmiyahu, Ki anochi ba'alti bachem, I've taken from you v'lekachti eschem echad mi'ir u'shnai mimishpacha. I've taken out one from the city and two from a family. What does this verse mean? Amr Rish Lakish, again, Rish Lakish is more harsh. You have to remember, Rish Lakish, again, in history, like I said last week, Rish Lakish is about Truva. He was a bandit, a murderer, that was changed by Rabbi Yochanan. He made him Baal Tshuva, married his sister. He became one of the great giants of the Beis Medrash. He became not just Rabbi Yochanan's student, but his colleague in arguing the call about the breaking of mountains. Rish Lakish was a huge giant in Torah. And Rabbi Yochanan recognized that in him as he was robbing him. It means Rish Lakish was threatening to rob, molest Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan noticed his potential at his weakest moment. Right, that's a great story on its own. But either way, at the end, Rabbi Yochanan did say things to him that were hurtful about his past when they argued in halacha. But here you see again that Rish Lakish is less understanding, and that compassion Rabbi Yochanan had for Rish Lakish himself, how he has for society. So it says, Rish Lakish says, Dvarim kiksavam. Rish Lakish has no problem saying it the way it is. Only one person is going to survive from a city. It means if you have a city, one person will survive from Moshiach, and only two people will survive out of a family. Kiksavan. Rabbi Yochanan again says to him, it's not good. Hashem doesn't like what you're saying. It's so much, you're causing, you're writing off so many people to survive. The Martulahach, they say this. Again, Rabbi Yochanan is Malamet Chus. Again, this is the same Rabbi Yochanan who saw as Rish Lakish was threatening to molest him and to kill him, that he saw in him his potential. Rabbi Yochanan is a person who they say Rabbi Yochanan was so beautiful physically. He had he looked like Yaakov Avinu, who looked like Adam. There's a short list of people that are considered beautiful in our history, and one of them is Rabbi Yochanan. And he would stand by the mikveh. The Gemara says he would stand by the mikveh when the woman would come out, so that they should want to have beautiful children like Rabbi Yochanan. He was a person that was very, very conscious of what's going on around him. He also lived in very difficult times. I believe he lived very long. I think he knew Rebbe, which means he lived from the closing of the Mishnah. And I think, and he closed the Talmud Yerushalmi. So he lived obviously he must have been very young in Rebbe's days. I think he lived in Rebbe's times, but he was Judaism of Eretz Yisrael after the Mishnah, which most people went back to Bavel to Babylonia. So that little group of people that stayed in Eretz Yisrael was Rabbi Yochanan. It was his yeshiva, which wasn't even in Yerushalayim. That was the Galil in the north. So he says that he doesn't like that Rabbi Rish Lakish says this. What does it mean? If you just have one righteous person in the city, the whole city is going to survive. Where do we know this from? Obviously from the story of Avram, who was also a kind person, who asked Hashem to save the city of Sodom if they could just find some righteous people. And if you have just two good people in the family will survive. Yosef Reb Kana Kamei Derav. Rav Kana lived in Bavel. Later, I think he came to Eretz Yisrael. He became a student of Rabbi Yochanan. So he also sat in front of Rav. A Rav, I believe, learned with Rabbi Yochanan by Rebbe. But Rav went to learn by Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael with his uncle Reb Chi, and then he went back and started the big yeshiva. He was the giant of Bavel, him and Shmuel. Both of them learned by Rebbe. So it was Rav, Shmuel, and Rabbi Yochanan all learned under Rebbe in their youth. So Rav Kana says in front of Rav, the Ka'amar, he says, Dvarim kiksav. No, the verse also, like Rish Lakish, he says the verse has to be taken literally. That one person will survive of a city and two people will survive of a family. Amalei Rav, so Rav said the same thing that Rabbi Yochanan said to Rish Lakish. God doesn't like that you say that. If there's one righteous person, that person will save the city. Right? Be careful when you run the people out of a city, right? Then you're going to end up like Sodom. And two people of a family will save a family. So Rashi says, Dvarim kiksavim shlayimlutu ela echel mi'ir v'shnai mishpacha. What does it mean, Dvarim kiksavim? Take this the verse literally. That Yimaltu, who's going to survive in the days of Moshiach, is going to be one person of a city and two of a family. So he says, V'kachti echad mi'ir b'shvil chasid echad shebe'ir ekach haskal kula. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rav learn no. What does it mean, V'lakachti echad mi'ir? That if there's one righteous person in the city, the whole city survives. Again, where do we find this from? We find this from Avram Avinu. That Avram Avinu was able to save. First of all, they saved Tzohar for Lot that wasn't destroyed, and also we saved. If there were more righteous peoples in Stone would have survived. And just the Marsha says, what does it mean? Two people of a family. Where do we see that a family was saved by two people? That Moshe and Aaron were two righteous people, and they saved the whole tribe of Levi. Meaning to say that Levi became a special tribe. They became a holy tribe in service. Besides the story of Korach, they weren't part of all the shtusim and all the foolishness in the desert. So Moshe and Aaron elevated the whole tribe of Levi. So we see two righteous people can elevate a tribe, can elevate a family. Meaning to say, it's from the Mashal, it's mashma. It's not a literal family, but an extended family. Okay. Now he says, Chazi dehave kacharev. I'm not sure why this continues, but either way, Chazi dehave kachaya ifreshe. Rav saw that Rav Kana was washing his hair in a way that kind of he was grooming himself, so to say. And then he sits down in front of Rav. What Rav took offense was that he instead of grooming himself, a Torah scholar shouldn't be involved in those things and try to take every minute to study Torah, not stand in front of the mirror. So so he quoted a verse that you won't find life in the earth, meaning to say he understood that to say that he was cursing him. He's not going to live. Are you cursing me? I just said a pasuk. What is the pasuk? A person who's Torah will not be found in the one who sustains himself in an indulgent manner. So you're trying to groom your hair, and that's not a place for a person of Torah. Not that he was saying that he wouldn't live, but he's not. Maybe shouldn't. Again, I think Rav Kana went there to Charlotte, and he also had some story with Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, he had a smirk. I think that's how he sat. He sat with a smirk, and Rabbi Yochanan thought he was smirking at him. Okay, either way, that's another story for another time. Chazi Rav, why is this piece of Gemara a continuation of the piece before? I don't know. Maybe kind of the Gemara is telling us again, where's the attribute of judgment in people come from? Judge yourself before you judge others. And sort of Kana was very, very strict to say only one person will survive of a city. So, Rav was kind of scolding him as well. Chazi Rav of Rav Kana, he was like grooming cleaning, he was taking care of his hair instead of learning Torah. So he says, he thought he means he's not going to come to the world to come. He says, no, but you're not going to be a person of Torah. A person of Torah demands commitment. Let's see how Reb Steinsaltz learns it. He quotes, he says, the Torah is not acquired by one who pampers and indulges oneself. It is acquired only through exertion and difficulty, in accordance with the statement of Rav, like he said. Okay, Torah. Okay, Tanya Reb Simoy Omer. Here's another piece that says, if you take out your calculators quickly, the numbers seem awesome, actually. Reb Simoy says like this, I'm taking you to me as a people, I'm going to bring you into the land. So from this we learn, as the Jewish people left Eretz Yisrael, as it should be, as they came into Eretz Yisrael, they left Egypt. Although he says we compare the leaving of Egypt to coming into Eretz Yisrael. Meaning, in what are we talking about? How many Jews left Egypt? Males from the age of 20 to 60 that they counted were 600,000 men. How many of those 600,000 men survived and went into the land? 2. We're not counting the tribe of Levi. 2. Who are the 2? Kalev and Yeshua. Right? The rest were all decreed on in the story of the spies, and they all died out. So it was the youths that were under the age of 20. And so it seems, I don't know why it's brought down also that the elderly weren't counted. But either way, only 2 survived of 600,000. So what does that mean? Here it says an amazing thing. How many people left Egypt, right? Everyone knows the Medrash. I think Aaron, you once quoted it, that in the days of darkness, in the plague of darkness, those 6 days, Jewish people died. So Rashi quotes in Parshas Beshalach how many Jewish people died. That 4/5 died. 4/5 of the society. So 4/5 of 600,000 is 2.5 million, right? If I'm counting quickly, right? So that's okay. Remember, there was to say that there was 2.5 million males between the ages of 20 and 60 after 210 years in Egypt. Okay, that can make sense. But here we're saying doesn't count one fifth went out. Only 600,000 means for every person that left Egypt, 300,000 people died. Well, and 600,000 left Egypt. So 600,000 times 300,000 is 180 billion. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of Jews to have been living in Egypt, Israelites, before they left Egypt. The number seems insane. And I didn't see any commentaries to call foul on this Gemara. I mean, you could say the Gemara is exaggerating, but there's exaggerating. 180 billion people. I saw one commentary says it was that how many people lived in Egypt. But even today, there's no country that has 180 billion people. So it says Shishim, because that's, I mean, if my math was right, Shnaim Shishim Rivai, only 2 of 600,000 left Egypt. Afitzi Asim Shnaim Shishim Rivai. And Omar Rav V'chein Li'mais Mashiach. Rav says that's how it's going to be when Mashiach comes. So in line with what Rish Lakish and Rav Kana was saying, that only two of 600,000 will survive when Mashiach comes. Again, we compare that she shall respond there as in the days of her youth, as in the days when she came out of the land of Egypt. And the ultimate redemption is also going to be that only 2 of 600,000 are going to survive. I even saw yesterday someone who was saying that the world is ready for a big event. And when he was saying, a non-Jewish guy was saying it about in business, because when that big event happens, you're going to know. You know, these small things that are happening now, everyone says these are big events. They're nice little rumblings, but nothing compared to what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. Again, there's different explanations. The Rebbe actually takes a very positive note to this. The Rebbe even talks about that the idea that's talking about those who are not going to survive. It's not that they're physically going to die. It's more the evil within people are people going to be the same people they were? Very few people will survive in their character of how they were, because they're going to have so much bad in them that when the time Mashiach comes, what's going to flush out of them, it's going to be like a makeover. Okay. Nemer b'parsha ve'era, so Rashi quotes, "V'kachti eschem li le'am v'chsiv b'asrei ve'avesi eschem elard." So we say that we see clearly that the way the Jewish people leave is the way they come into the land. Ma b'yasim l'ard shnayim misamach rivai, just like when they left, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, only 2 of 600,000 entered the land. Why? Shlei nishtaru misamach rivai yishiyatzu mitzrayim ele beis Hashem. There's only 2 who survived of the 600,000 that left Egypt, and they were both older the age of 20. Who is who? Yehoshua and Kalev. Right, that we learn Yeshua and Kalev, only them were survived. The Torah says clearly, the Gemara and Bab Basra says that the decree of not going to the land did not apply to anyone below 20 or over 60. And also those who went into the land, we only counted those who were over 20 and under 60, and of that, only 2 went in, and so too, when Mashiach comes, and those numbers are going to be the same. Only 2 of 600,000 left. Of 600,000, the number riboy in English in Hebrew is a unit of 10,000. So 10,000 is 600,000, right? So of the 600,000, right? We don't count 10,000 as a number. Is in America? I know in India they have a number. I forget what it's called. They call it a core. So that's also a number that makes up of a certain amount of counting. Only 2 survived the 600,000. And from those 2, 600,000 went out. And the rest all died out again. Interesting. I'm going to do the math again quickly on the calculator, make sure I'm not just talking shtuyot. But 600,000 times 600,000 times 300,000 300,000 times 300,000 times 600,000. Yes, 180 billion people. Okay, a lot of people. So it says like this: Like it says, and they all died in so the Egyptians shouldn't see the Jews dying. Again, Rashi in the Chumash says that 1/5 went out. 1/5 would make 2.5 million, but a little more. Sorry, 1/5 make more than 2.5 million, 600,000. So it's there's 3 million. Sorry, but still 3 million is a number that makes sense. So to Mashiach comes, only 2 will survive 600,000. Like he quotes, you're going to be poor. Again, Rashi is saying a different pshat than the literal pshat, that the Jewish people will be poor and low, right? That seems to be the shefelim part being kicked around, seems to be the game of the day today, in the days of Mashiach, like they were treated in the days of Egypt. Okay, let's go further. Tanya Amar Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yossi said, you have to remember, those who know history, that in the time of the Second Temple and around that time, also after the destruction, there was a huge Jewish community in Egypt. There was even the Beis Hamikdash. They had a temple, the temple of Chania, but the shul at Alexandria was a huge Jewish community. So much so they said the shul was so big that when it came time to answer Amen, they had to raise flags. Otherwise, you couldn't hear the chazan, not just because people were schmoozing, but because so many people were in the shul. So it says, so once I went into the Alexandria of Egypt, I found an old person. Not because that old person, according to most people, survived, but an old person who knew things. Let me show you what my forefathers did to your forefathers, means how the Egyptians treated the Jews or the Israelites. Some were they threw in the sea, like Egypt said, Pharaoh said, throw the Jewish children in the Nile. Others were just killed. That we don't learn about so much, about those who were just killed by sword. Some of them they put into the buildings. Instead of placing bricks, they put Jewish bodies. And this is why Moshe was punished. And it says, means Moshe said that things got worse. What does it get worse? And he got punished because when he saw the way that the Egyptians were treating the Jews and how it got even worse when Moshe came to announce the redemption. Right? And he says, Hina Mashiach ba, things got worse. So he says, Ma'aku b'binyan hayu bayin b'makom levenim. They would put Jewish bodies in instead of bricks. B'makom levenim, instead of bricks. What does it mean that Moshe was punished for this? Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw what was happening to the Jewish people, he started to question Hashem, to think. That's what Moshe says. Ever since I came here, things got worse for the Jews. Now we're going on to this beautiful new section, the very famous piece of Gemara about Hashem's conversations with Moshe, about Moshe's punishments and Moshe's discussions with Hashem. Again, it says clearly, the Marsha says that this Zokin Echa, this old elderly man, is not an indication by the Gemara calling him elderly. We're talking about Rabbi Yossi living in the time at best at the end of the Second Temple. We're talking about close to 1,000 years since the liberation of Egypt. So this Zakin wasn't the survivor, but the Marsha says he was just old, so he knew where the books of you have to remember also before the Christians came and burnt down Alexandria. Alexandria was a huge library that collected, it was probably put to shame any national library that we have today, whether it's the Library of Congress or even the Vatican or other places of the British Museum. The library in Alexandria had tremendous treasures of information, books on magic and things that was all burnt down by the Christians around that time. But so they had somewhere in those books, Marsha says, in proof of what happened to the Jews, of what the Egyptians did to the Jews. So now Moshe complains to God. God says to Moshe, Chaval da'ovdim v'lo mishtachim. The famous Gemara says, woe to over those who are gone and they're no longer found. It means God is now, when he hears Moshe complaining, he says, I miss my forefathers. I miss Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I revealed myself in a lesser revelation in the name of Kel Shakai, not Havaya, Yudke Vavke, to the fathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. V'lo hirharu al midaisai. They never thought, they never questioned my actions. They never asked me my name. Here we find something fascinating Gemara. When Moshe Rabbeinu is standing at the burning bush, and he has a job. Like the Rebbe explains, Moshe is Chacham. Moshe is the attribute of understanding. And by being the attribute of understanding, he has to ask questions. So he has it clear. And also, he's as a good messenger, he has to prepare himself. So he says to God, they're going to ask me your name. Right? And there's the famous idea. What do you mean he's going to ask me your name? They're going to say, what attribute was the name of God that was in there when the Jewish people are being slaughtered? They want you're coming in as a messenger of God, say, Hine Megillah, Hine Moshiach ba, it's the time of Geula, it's time to leave Egypt. Where were you? So they're going to ask me your name. What name of God do you have? That's the famous thing. God said, Eka Chelek. I was with you in the time of Egypt, and where I was with you, and I'll be with you in the time of the exile. Moshe says, I won't say that part. You're going to get them depressed. But now at the end, God says, and Moshe came back after that, goes into Egypt, goes to Pharaoh, asks Pharaoh to let the Jewish people out, and it gets worse for the Jews. He says, since I've showed up, I think made it worse. So God says, you know what? I actually didn't like that you asked in the first place what my name is, because they never asked me my name. You never find it anywhere. Besides this Gemara, that God was b'chalal disappointed that Moshe asked him his name. Amarti la'Avram, when I said to Avram, Kum yisalach ba'aretz, go walk the land. La'arka l'rachva, to its length and to its width. Ki lachat nenu, this is your land. Bikish marka lik for Sarah, when it comes time for him to bury Sarah. He could have turned to God and said, I thought you gave me the land. I know he couldn't even find a place to bury his wife. God's old stories he's bringing up. He's bringing up Ephron, overcharging Avram. Avram didn't complain. He paid happily 400 silver coins that were over the Seicher, international currency. So he says, he could have asked me, what's the deal? You just told me that this is my land and I can't even bury my wife. I have to pay outrageous monies to Ephron to bury my wife. Lahir al midaisi, he doesn't question. Amalai Rashi says, Chaval al da'avdim v'le'mishtakchin. Hefsid gadol, it's a huge loss. Yesh le'agdolim on these great people, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, she'avdu ve'eni yochel limtza chasidim acherim k'maisim. I can't find people like them anymore. She'ein atem k'Avram, you're sorry, you're not like Avram, and you're not like Yitzchak, you're not like Yaakov. Shlo hiru acherim midais, they didn't question me. They didn't say mi'az basi. And then God brings up other things that he was disappointed about, that he kind of bit his tongue on earlier. El kel shaki shamarti la ani kel shaki pray verbe, when he says to the people, be fruitful and multiply. Ani kel shaki halach lefane vayitamim, be complete. Vayisi mafticha shekol eretz Yisrael lo yilevanav, I promised them the land for him as his descendants. V'lei amru ma shemecha k'may sha'atzisata. And Rashi quotes before even the story of Sarah. Although we do find Avram says, how do I know? Right? And he was punished for that also. He said, how do I know that I'm going to have that, and that's when he was told in the vision that he's going to have, that his kids are going to go into Gullus. But nevertheless, God doesn't count that in this conversation. He says to Moshe, you didn't ask me, Avram didn't say, what's your name? Before he went on his mission with Sarah to go to the land. And he didn't question me when he couldn't find a place to bury his wife. It's Sarah. Amarti li Yitzchak, I said to Yitzchak, Gur ba'aretz hazeh, don't leave Egypt. Don't leave to Egypt. There was a famine. Live in the land. And I'm going to be with you and I'm going to bless you. And when he wants water to drink, he has to fight it out with the Philistines. Nothing's changed. They were fighting about the water. He didn't say what's going on. He said, you're going to be with me and I should stay here. This is the place for me. And I can't even find a glass of water. Amarti li Yaakov, I said to Yaakov, this land that you're sleeping on, when he has the vision on the way to Lavan, it's yours. When he just wanted to set his tent up on his way back from Lavan, he couldn't find. He had to pay a lot of money. to put up his tent. He didn't say what's going on. Again, the Gemara says he didn't ask me your name. My name. Not you asked me what's my name. It's mamish that God is bringing. Moshe just came in and is like trying to figure out, as a good leader should figure out, what's the deal. I came to save the Jewish people and they're being slapped, and God's bringing up an old conversation they had a few months ago. Now you accuse me, I'm not going to save the Jewish people. You'll see what happens to Parai. This is the first time Moshe is told he's not going into the land. Now, a lot of the Mepharshim say it doesn't make sense. He wasn't going to go into the land, not because he questioned God, but because he hit the rock. So some Mepharshim answer that one is that he could have entered the land but not seen the wars, and when he hit the rock, he wouldn't even enter the land. But sometimes things kind of evolve. There's kind of come out later. Here, the Yifas Torah says, what did Moshe do so wrong by asking Hashem's name? What do you want him to do? Because I'm going to just read the Hebrew and translate. Moshe was only asking, seemingly, because to know if they're going to ask me, identify yourself. Where's your proof? So, and they had a tradition that was the name. So why was he punished for that? It says here, what am I going to tell them? So nevertheless, God said, so nevertheless, God looked at it, he kind of didn't subscribe to that. Again, we have a beautiful talk from the Rebbe in 1983, where the Rebbe does explain a bit what Moshe was saying. It wasn't just asking him for his name. Moshe said to God, we know that the attributes of God, God's names represents God's attributes. And God is kind, it's Kel, Kavur is Elikim. So Moshe was coming to God and says to God, you want me to come redeem the Jewish people? They're going to have one question. Where was he? Where was God in the Holocaust? Where was God in Egypt? What name of God was allowing Pharaoh to bathe in Jewish blood? Because every name of God represents an attribute of God. God's the way God operates. Tell me the name of God that operates that. And the Rebbe says that God said, I was with him in that. I was sitting there in the pain with him. But we see that Moshe was asking the name kind of in a way that was asking God, what's going on over here? How are the Jewish people being treated this way? And that's Moshe's job as a good leader. He didn't complain that he was punished. It says, the idea of lintoya, the wording of lintoya comes to putting up a tent as opposed to building a home. First you asked me my name. And again, God said that asking the name was challenging God on his behavior. And now you're saying, I won't free the Jewish people. Now you will see the miracles that the Jewish people experience. You will not see the miracles of the 31 kings. Many commentators here. Here's this where I saw this. Reb Sheinzal says many commentators question that which the Gemara indicates here, that the reason Moshe was not privileged to enter Eretz Yisrael was not due to his actions in the instance of the waters of Meribah, but that long before that it was decreed that he will not lead the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael, because he asked God what his name is, and then accused God of not wanting to save the Jewish people. Some distinguish between the two decrees. Initially, it was decreed that Moshe would not see the wars of the kings. In other words, the conquest of their land, but that he would live in and enter Eretz Yisrael. Could be he would enter, but he wouldn't kind of see whatever that means, whether it's he would pass away before the wars or not be leader then, whatever. After the incident involving the waters of Meribah, it was decreed that he will not enter the land. So says the Riyaf, Pinto. In the Medrash, Moses' punishment results from several instances, not from one, and therefore it's not one isolated incident. There's a few things. Okay, the Gemara continues. We're talking about the 13 attributes, very very appropriate to the month of El, the revelation of the 13 attributes. So it says when Moshe heard the 13 attributes, So, like it says, the Lord passed over him and proclaimed the Lord, compassionate, gracious God, slow to anger, abandoning in love and kindness and truth, extending the loving kindness to the thousands of generations. Those are the 13 attributes. Now it says, Vayimahar Moshe, when Moshe heard the 13 attributes, Vayikad Artzav Ishtachu, he bowed. Ma Ra Moshe, what did Moshe see to bow? Means what, like Rashi says, Ma Ra al Eza Mida Achas, Shayud Gimel Midas Rav Ishtachu. Which of the 13 attributes caused Moshe to bow? So Reb Steinzat says, the Mishra says, the reason why the Gemara asked this question is because Moshe definitely knew the 13 attributes. He saw, so the question is, what made him bow when he saw the 13 attributes now? It says the inference is from that which is written, and Moshe made haste and bowed his head towards the earth and prostrated himself, indicating that he bowed before God, finishing enumerating the 13 attributes of mercy. The question is, what was it that led him to prostrate himself at that point? What did Moshe hear? And the Gemara is going to explain. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamla Amar Erech HaPayim, when he saw about God's slow to anger, that made Moshe bow. We're going to see why. For Rabbanan Amri Emes, when he saw truth, there's different explanations what made Moshe bow from seeing truth. But when he saw truth, we'll see Rashi first, and then we'll see the other Mefarshim, that he bowed. He saw truth, and when he heard about truth, he bowed. Tani Kamanda Amar Erech HaPayim Ra. So I have a proof, according to Rabbi Chanina ben Gamla, that what made Moshe bow is when he acknowledged a past conversation that he had with God, and now he needed what the 13 attributes were said in the Torah when after the sin of the golden calf, when the Jewish people needed kapara atonement. So Moshe back earlier challenged God on his 13 attributes, and now he bowed because he realized that God was right. That you have to have mercy, you have to be slow to anger. So he says, what did he see? The Tani, because we learned, Kishala Moshe Lamarim, when Moshe went up to heaven, he saw that God was writing the 13 attributes. And God was writing, Moshe looked over God's shoulder and he writes, he's slow to anger. Who are you going to have slow to anger? Is it going to be for the righteous? So God said, even for the wicked. And Moshe challenged God. Amalei says, why should you have compassion for the wicked? Let them be doomed. Let them be destroyed. So God tells to Moshe, now you will see that you'll need Erech HaPayim. And when did he need it? When now he needed it for the Jewish people. When he bowed because he realized God was right. Emes Ra, what did he see? He saw truth. The problem with the challenge with understanding this Rashi is that Moshe seemingly, when he was up in heaven, said, why do you have Erech HaPayim? Why are you slow to anger to the wicked? And when he saw Emes, he was scared, right? When God asked Emes said, don't create the world. When God asked the attribute of Emes, should he create the world? He says, don't create the world. It says, Hashlech al Emes Arza. Emes was thrown to the ground. God created the world. Why? Emes says, if you want Emes, you want truth. Moshe was scared. If they're going to do something that deserve destruction, if he's going to judge them in truth, so according to Rashi, Moshe bowed, according to the opinion, who was it? The opinion of Rabbanon, he bowed at Emes because he was scared of Emes. If one of the 13 attributes is Emes, Emes is a scary attribute. Like I said, Emes said truth, Emes is truth, right? Truth says don't even create the world. And Moshe was concerned that if God is going to use truth to judge the Jewish people, truth will say the law the way it is, say the truth as it is, right? The truth is that maybe they are deserving punishment. So Moshe prayed when he heard Emes, he prayed. The Marsha says that the Ramah says that the opposite. So that the Ramah says no. When he heard Emes, he was happy to know that God's attributes are true. When if he says something in the positive, it's not going to go back. So anything that God says is not going to go back empty-handed. And we know Yedua Shesayfi L'Kaim of the Chassid Yisrael, And he knew that all the promises of the good things that are going to happen to the Jewish people are going to happen. And therefore he bowed at emes and simcha. Rashi learns the opposite. That Moshe was scared of emes. It says, Tani Kamandam Erechapayim. Ra, the Tani Kshalim Aishal Marim, Amr Lighter Shraim Yavaidu, La Yilam Erechapayim. So Moshe said at the time, when he saw God writing the 13 attributes, he shouldn't. He says, let them die. And now he realized that he's wrong. Kishachati Yisrael, and the Jewish people sinned. Amr Leikacham Artli Echapayim Tzadikim, and God Moshe was pleading for the case of the Jewish people. God said, 1 second. Erechapayim. Here he says that it's talking about the spies. It's the story of spies, Erechapayim. It's not the story of the 13 of the golden calf. But either way, he says, you said only the righteous. Why should I be compassionate for the Jewish people? You were the one who said I shouldn't have compassion for the wicked. So he says, but you said that you said the opposite. You said that we have to have compassion for the wicked as well. And that this is why Rav Steinzalt says, why are we talking about the story of the spies and not the story of the golden calf? Although that Vaymar Moshe Vishtachu happened by the golden calf is because Moshe continues, you should do what you said and have Erech HaPayim. Then again he quotes the 13 attributes. And Moshe quotes to God the 13 attributes, Kasher Dibarta, like you said it, you have to have Erech HaPayim, you have to have slow to anger, even for the wicked. I'm the fun of Vahashta. Command Amr Erech HaPayim Ra, Shekivin Shara Mida Zush, Bakadosh Baruch Hu Shu Erech HaPayim after Shaim Sameach. And that's why Moshe bowed, because he was happy when he saw that God was right, that you have to have compassion even for the wicked. Okay, just before we go further a little bit for a second, it says, quotes the pasuk that it says, I think it's the Moshe says, the Eitz Yosef, he says, there's a pasuk to support that Moshe says, Ba'ovid Rishayim Rina. Okay, they go on to explain whether it's talking about a case where all the Jewish people sin or just individuals sin. Okay. Let's just do one more piece of Gemara. Rab Chaga ha-v'solik v'azal b'darga devei Rab Sheila. Rab Chaga was walking up the stairs in the school of Rab Sheila. Shemai lahu Yenuka, he heard a young boy, the Amr Nemnu mi'oid leveis chana v'kodesh Hashem li'arach. He heard the end of chapter 93 that says, your testimonies are very sure. Sanctity becomes your house, Lord of the length of days. And before that, in chapter 90, it says, Tefillah Moshe, that these are all the prayers of Moshe. From this you see that the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu says, you're very truthworthy, and it's the Oirach Yamim for long life, so that's the Erech HaPayim that he saw, and he bowed. Okay, let's just finish over here the Rashis. The so we know that is talking Moshe Rabbeinu. It's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu because it's Tefillah Moshe. These are, I think, it's 13, or is it 10 chapters that Moshe said? And this is one of them. And why is he talking about the long life? Is because he's appreciating that God's right to have Erech HaPayim slow to anger. It is unclear how Reb Chagai arrived to this conclusion on the basis of the verse that he heard from the child's recite. But when compared to the parallel text in the Medrash, it can be understood in this manner. Reb Haga, heard the verse, your testimonies are very sure, Lord, for the length of days. To the subsequent verse, O Lord God, to whom vengeance belongs, O God, to whom vengeance belongs. Chapter is the next chapter, 94. And derived that the Lord for the length of days means that God is slow to anger and waits a long time before he punishes the wicked. The verse, a prayer of Moshe, indicates, as stated explicitly in several midrashic sources, that Moshe recites the 10 Psalms of 90 to 99. All right, everyone, thank you for joining. And I thought we would get to the Mishnah, but I guess we'll have to do that next week. Yasher Koach, everyone, and Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.